Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series presentation on payroll processing. Obviously, this is a very complicated thing within the system, so I'm going to go as quickly as possible, very generically as well. This will be for a US-based company. The process is very similar, if not exactly the same, for Canadian or UK. UK does have one extra step, but you don't worry about the taxes themselves being whatever state or federal taxes, whatever. The processes themselves are going to be the same. I do want to put out a disclaimer here, since we are talking about payroll, which has the possibility of talking about taxes, that if you do have any questions regarding your taxability of incomes or deductions or things related to taxes, please consult a accountant or tax advisor or tax consultant, because we are not able to provide any tax advice outside of possibly configuring something for you based off of your input. We're not going to take any liability for taxes. So that being said, let me go ahead and switch over to self-service. And I do want to remind everybody that we do have a Q&A, and we also have a chat available. So if you do have questions, again, nothing specific, hopefully, that was going to require a lot of time, but maybe something more generic. We'll be happy to try to answer those questions for you. If you do have some specific question about an issue that's happening with you or a question related to yours, of course, you can reach out to support directly, and we'll be happy to help you out with those questions, maybe with a setup or something like that. So here in self-service, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about payroll processing. So the first place we're going to start, the way I have my system configured, is we're using our timesheets for the time that's going to get processed in payroll. Your process might be different. You might be using another system, or maybe everybody's salaried, or you manually enter the time or something like that. But I'm going to go through like you're doing it with our timesheets. So of course, the employee can go to their timesheet and they could put in their time, submit it for approval, and so forth. Your timesheet might look different than what you see here. I've got, very generic, just 8 hours per day for this person. Yours, you might have multiple entries a day, you might have more columns and things like that. So yours could certainly look different compared to what you see here. But this is a view of a timesheet, a vertical timesheet, as we call it, because the days go vertically down the side here. But yours might look different, but this just show you what this looks like. I'm doing a weekly payroll. You might be bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly, some other range. Mine's weekly in my situation here for this demonstration. So that's what an employee's timesheet would look like. And of course, they might be clocking in and out throughout the day and the week, submitting their time. I've already submitted my timesheet. You see here, it's already been approved. That step would mean that, the person went to their timesheet, they submitted it, and went through a workflow to be approved. Now, who's going to be doing the approval? Could be the manager, could be payroll, somebody else. They're going to have a view team timesheets where they can review the timesheets for the employees they have access to. They'll be able to see the status of those timesheets. As you can see here, I've got most of mine approved. There's some that are not submitted. I can use this view right here to look for different statuses of the timesheets. So for an example, if I want to see ones that are not submitted, just like that, maybe if they've been rejected or they've been verified but not approved, whatever the situation is, I can use this right up here to look for it. If I don't want to filter it all, just remove that status by clearing it out. And I can see those here. Now, I do have a few. They're not submitted here. As you can see, I've got 4. They're not submitted. As a manager in the status that I'm in right now, I do have the ability to mass submit, or I can individually submit them by either going into the timesheet and reviewing it and doing whatever I might need to do for this particular person. Maybe I need to make a change if I'm able to do that, depending on my security. But I can individually submit a timesheet right here for this person. So you can see now it's going to change this to say that it was submitted. I can also use this little arrow here to submit the timesheet if I don't need to review it. Maybe I've already reviewed it. So this will go ahead and submit the timesheet as well. I also have the ability, as I mentioned, to do a mass submit or mass approve or reject right here. So these are the 2 that are currently not submitted. If I want to show the ones that are submitted but not approved, I can do that. Here you'll see how do I mass submit them. Maybe I've already reviewed them and I want to submit them. We'll see how that works there. Now, again, I can look at the status. So show me the ones that are submitted. waiting for my approval. Now, I might not see these if I'm not the approver. This might not show anything here, and then the approver would have to log in and do that. So depending on your approval process, you may or may not be able to approve them if you're not the approver. Now, that approver is going to get an email, possibly a text message, a notification in the system, as you can see right here. So you can see that right there. Here you can see what it would look like if I do it not on the team timesheet view, but if I go to the task, I can see those timesheets that have been submitted for me to review. And I could bring them up on screen here, look at the various things. I can hit this summary to see the total hours. Again, I'm using just very generic 8 hours per day for these people. Yours, of course, might be more sophisticated. You may have overtime, shift differentials, various projects, tasks, etc. There are different pay codes. There might be a holiday in here. I chose like I said, a very generic one just for ease of use for this payroll. But here you can see I have the option down here at the bottom to reject it, which would send it back to the person who submitted it to say you need to fix something, or I can approve it. Of course, if I hit cancel, nothing's going to change on it. But if I do hit reject, I have to put in a comment. You'll notice that this will make this required. I don't have to put in a comment if I approve it. Right, when I do that, it's going to bring up the next one to approve. Of course, I just have a handful right here, so I can very easily approve those. Don't worry about this thing here going to another app. You may not have this here where it's synchronizing with another app. I'll clear that out there. It'll clear out in a second. But you can see here, it's approved. Let me go ahead and approve these others. Now, as I mentioned, I can do this on the team timesheet as well. So team timesheet, I'm looking for the ones that are submitted. I don't need to do that. I could do it from here too. You'll see here, here's that one. I can just click this to approve it, a little check mark, a little red X there to reject it. Or I can use the mass submit and just check this box here to show me that all the ones that are still outstanding. Now, if I do this, the only thing is I do have to put a comment. So like that. All right, so lots of different ways of approving and reviewing the timesheets and things like that. Now, they do not all have to be approved to get started with payroll. Perhaps you are waiting for some to come through and you want to get started with payroll. You don't have to hold up your whole payroll process just because you have 1 or 2 timesheets or even half the timesheets not yet approved. You can get started and then bring them in as they get approved. You can run the import into the payroll multiple times if you need to. Now, I've approved all of mine, but I could get started without it. So where do you get started? So that's going to be, of course, over on the administrative side. I would go to payroll right here. I already have it open. So over here. Now, the way I have mine configured is I have different pay groups out here for different pay periods. So when I go to add a batch, I'm going to have some options here for different pay periods. Let's talk about how those work here. So in your payroll administration, you'll have different payroll schedules that are going to be set up, different pay groups that are going to use those schedules. So here you'll see some examples here of like a weekly payroll schedule out here. And you can see the various dates that are for this payroll schedule. All right, now these are configured usually once a year. Of course, we're getting towards the end of the year. So you probably would want to make one, you know, as you get towards November, December for next year. Very simple to be able to do that. Just click this button here that says new. And this will help you to create one for next year. So this is telling me it's going to start on 12/24/23. How does it decide that? Well, that's the last pay period end date, or 1 day after last pay period end date for this year. So that's why it's going to create that. So go ahead and do this. And I need to, this is weekly, so I'm going to do 52. Generate those. Of course, I'm not going to use these right now, but you can see all these. Of course, I could change these if I need to, but that's how you create a payroll schedule. We're going to go over this again when we do the year-end training in a little while, in a month or so. So we'll go over this again, but that just shows you how you would do this. Of course, you might have other frequencies, like I've got bi-weekly and monthly. You'd have to create those for every pay period you're going to be using next year. You'll need to have those created before the year starts, so people can start tracking their time and you can do payroll. All right, pay groups. So if you're running payroll, you probably use pay groups. You don't have to, you're not required to, just makes your life much easier because all these things are already fine. So here you'll see my weekly pay group. It's using that schedule that I created called weekly. Here are the various income codes that I'm going to use by default. I can add others. I can remove when I'm in the payroll processing, but these are the ones I'm going to use by default for this group of employees called active employees. Now, this doesn't mean that somebody can't be in multiple pay groups. Perhaps you pay weekly, but you also do like a monthly commission. So somebody might be in multiple pay groups, and that's okay. Just different groups can be used for that. All right, so just an example there. If I needed to add an income code, for example, I'll just pick one, let's say mileage, just add that in there. And now going forward, it'll be used or be available to use in that pay group. All right, so that's how you create those here. A couple of things that can impact payroll processing, just to be aware of. We do have the deduction frequency here. This is used to determine when different deductions are going to be calculated. So here I'll show you this weekly one as an example. You can call it anything you like as far as the code and description. This is the unit that it's going to use weekly, so every week here. Here are the payroll numbers in the month. So because we're doing weekly, we could have potentially 5 pay periods in the month. Now you do bi-weekly, you might have 2 or 3, and of course semi-monthly, monthly, different frequencies here. But this is telling it, okay, take the deduction out on each one of these frequencies. So perhaps you have a deduction that only comes out once a month, but you do a weekly payroll. So you might have one out here that says, just do it the first period of the month, and then all these other ones wouldn't be here. So you may need to set that up for various deductions. You can have, of course, a mixture of, weekly and bi-weekly and monthly or something like that. So, you might need to set these up. You'll see here, this is how we determine the payroll number. So we have different options, either the pay date, the actual date of the payment, or the pay period end date. So those could, of course, be very different. They could be separated by several days, and that might determine where it is in the month. The pay period might end, let's say, the 30th, and then the pay date is the 5th or something like that. So does that count as the first period or the last period? All right, so all that goes into the payroll processing. Of course, there's incomes, deductions, and so forth. I'm not going to cover all those. We've done training on those before, but just wanted to cover some of the terminology and some of the setup of that. So let's go over here, and I'm going to start a payroll. Now, if you do not have multiple employers, you will not have to choose employers. I have 2, so I have to choose the employer. And then once I do that, you'll see, of course, there's some required fields here: the schedule, the name, etc. These are all required. What I'm going to do, so I don't have to select a couple of these, is I'm going to go ahead and just choose the pay group, and that's going to determine the schedule, of course, because that's set up in the pay group. And then I can tell it which pay period to use. I'm going to use the one I just processed, 9/30 here. Now this goes to that deduction frequency. The pay period end date is in September. The check date's in October. So is that the last payroll of the month, or is that the first, depending on the pay date or the pay period end date? So that's how that is going to be determined there. Now the name, this can be used in multiple places. Of course, one is just to differentiate one payroll from another. So if you're doing like a bi-weekly and a weekly, or maybe you do bi-weekly, but every other week there's a new payroll or something, you might use different names to let people know which one's which. This also might go over in your ERP. For an example, if you're going to Acumatica or Intacct, there might be like a note field or a memo field or something like that that identifies it. So maybe you have to say like payroll date, 10/6/23, something like that, because it's going to go over to your ERP. So that might be useful for that. So you can use that. I'm just using the pay date. You really can do anything you want. So I might say pay date 10/6, right? Now, once I do that, it's going to go find everybody in that pay group weekly. And of course, they need to be active employees in this time frame. So it's going to go find all those people. I did want to mention one other thing here. On cycle, off cycle. So if it's just what I would consider a quote normal payroll, like your weekly payroll, it's probably going to be on cycle. Off cycle lets you do something that's not a normal payroll, like maybe it's a bonus run or termination or something like that. This might impact which deductions come out. So you might say, well, if it's off cycle, it's like a bonus. We don't want all of our normal deductions to come out, just certain ones. So it's off cycle. Or maybe I need to go look back further into the past or forward. So that I'm going to go off cycle. When you do this on cycle in a pay period, you can only go forward, the current one, and then like 2 forward. If you choose off cycle, you can go back further. So I think you go back 2 pay periods more if you need to do that. All right, so here's the list of all those active employees who are in that pay group. So I've got about 100 or so employees here. Now I'm going to import my time from my timesheet. So I'll click on import, and then I'll choose load data and load timesheet. So this is going to go out there, find all the approved timesheets. Hopefully there's no errors, but potentially there's errors. It's not very often you're going to see errors if you're loading directly from our timesheets. More often than not, you're going to see errors if you're doing like importing something from a spreadsheet or something. You might have errors because there's some invalid data. So here's the records I'm going to add to the batch. Now, 485, I don't have 485 employees. What I have is 485 records spread across all of those employees. So people have different, number of entries. They might have 5 entries for the week. That's 5 records, not 1 record. So that's why it says a lot more than 111, because there's a number of records per employee. Now, other things I could import, as I mentioned, I might import incomes and deductions. This would be like from a spreadsheet. So perhaps you're importing in, I don't know, mileage or bonuses or something like that from a spreadsheet. So you can use different templates for this. Of course, reach out to support if you have questions on how that works, because we can tell you how to format that. It is something that is customizable. You can change the format a little bit, but there's going to be something set in your system probably, so you may not know what that is. So we can help you out with that. Importing deductions, the nice thing about this is we do generate a template. So you can just use that template to import deductions. And then this also allows you to load commissions and expense reports. Those are things that could possibly be coming over. I didn't do that, but you might have commissions that are loaded in the system, and you also might have expense reports. So if those are in there, you can load those in too. All right, so I have the time out here. It's still showing nothing because I need to calculate. So this will go out there. It's going to evaluate all that time and any salaries that are out there, calculate the taxes and deductions. Taxes are going to look at like the geolocation for the employee as well as where they've worked, determine the taxes for the employees. And the various deductions are going to be based off of, whatever they've got as far as, maybe benefits and retirement and other things like that. So here you can see, I'm going to click into this person's timesheet. So he had 40 hours at $62.50 per hour. And of course, that comes out to $2,500. You see how that works here. Now, of course, if he had overtime or something else, it would be in these other columns. I can override these if I want to. For an example, maybe I do want to give him a bonus. I can type that in here. All right, not importing it, obviously, in a situation. I'm typing it in, and I'm going to recalculate, and it's going to now change that amount to $2,600. And these taxes and stuff changed. Of course, your taxes may not be Connecticut. It could be other states, provinces, countries, whatever. Just an example here. Here you see various deductions that this employee has. All right, now I can override these as well. So if I needed to make a change here, you're paying quite a bit for dental. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, but you can see how that's working there. Maybe it was a typo, should have been $40 or something, and I need to go fix that. Now, of course, I can fix it here, but this is not going to go back and update these employees' records to reflect, the right amount. Next time, it's going to also probably be $400. Maybe this was an arrears amount or something, but I can override it if I need to. When I do that and I recalculate, it's going to highlight it in yellow. Let me know that it changed. Maybe you want to put a note on the person's pay stub to let them know, okay, we overrode your dental to $40 rather than the normal amount. All right, so you can see how those are all working here. Like same type of thing I could do to the employer deductions. Some of these are employer only, like this WC, maybe that's workers' comp or something. That's not something the employee is paying. So there's nothing over here, but it's over here. Right now, the taxes, I do not have my system currently set up to override the taxes. That is a setting that we can enable. It's not something that like you have to call support to do, but if you want to get a little bit of help guiding you through where to set that up and kind of talk about what the problems are that could happen if you do that, reach out to support or your partner, because we want to be cautious. We don't want you to override the taxes then have a problem because you calculated Social Security wrong or something. So it is something that could be set as setting that is available to you on a payroll settings, but just be aware of it. I recommend not turning it on unless you know exactly what you need to do. Maybe just turn it on temporarily while you fix something and then turn it off again. All right, so I can review one employee at a time. You'll see here other settings like expense reports. If I had already imported those, it would have them in here. Otherwise, I can go out and I can import in an approved expense report for this date range for this employee individually if I want to. All right, so very simple to do that. If I made a change, I want to save that. I can also edit multiple people. check off the box next to them, and I hit view. This will give me the chance now to go next up here. You'll notice how I'm going through the employees, and of course I could edit these people. Maybe I needed to override this. Now, if I put in hours here, it's not going to write them back to the timesheet. I've already brought this stuff in from the timesheet. So if I put in 10 hours of overtime, it's not going to go and update the timesheet to show 10 hours. So just be aware of that if you make an edit to the time, it doesn't go back to the source. It's now in payroll itself. All right, so other things you might want to look at, I'm going to go ahead and close out of here, is you might want to export this out into a spreadsheet to review. Okay, there's also reports that you can run as well up here at the top that can be used to evaluate this payroll. So let me open up this export, just in case you've never seen this before. This gives you a detail of everything that is on this payroll batch. So it's an Excel. Let me just switch this around here. All right, so the first thing you'll notice, there's 6 tabs down here at the bottom, 6 sheets. And it's first off showing me all the incomes that could potentially be in this batch. Now you'll notice a lot of them have 0, because if you remember when I looked at 10 as an example, you had double time and holiday and mileage, all that was 0. So it does show every income code here, even though there might not be an amount or hours. So if you ever want to use this, maybe to just look at like the hours per income code, you might want to do something like a filter and just say, well, let's just, anything that's 0 hours, let's just leave that off. And then you can see the ones that are, well, not maybe blank as well. It's up to you. And now you just get the hours. Of course, you may want to look at the amounts, because remember, I did have that bonus. So I might want to say if the amount is 0 and the hours are 0, let's leave those both off. So you might want to, mix and match those things, or sort or something like that. Of course, if you had project and task information, you'll see we have these columns right here that would show all that detail. I did not do that in my example, but it might have multiple lines of regular for a person. If they worked across lots of different projects and tasks, they might have, a whole bunch of lines of regular, because it's all broken out, showing that detail of all the hours worked out. You'll see over here also, we have the custom fields that could be on a timesheet, the work area, as well as the work location. So if they had multiple locations and stuff like that, you might see multiple lines of an income code per person. All right, this tab here is going to show the totals of the income. So this is not going to have multiple lines for regular and so forth if they had all that detail of projects and tasks. This is going to have 1 row per employee, and then 1 column for every income code in the batch. So that way you could do like totals at the bottom and say, okay, what's my total overtime? What's my total bonus, etc., so that you can get those totals. We don't include a total by default, but it's super easy to do that in Excel. Just hit the little total button. All right, so you see how that works there. Okay, same type of thing with deductions. Now I've got, again, 1 row per employee, 1 column for every deduction code. And employer deductions, same idea. All of these other tabs on here are going to have the same thing. 1 row for employee, 1 column for every deduction or tax. So you'll see I do have somebody in Canada, or a couple people in Canada. So you see how it's showing some Canadian taxes here. And then employer taxes, same idea. All right, so this might be very useful to you if you're an Excel type person who likes to look in Excel and do stuff. This might be helpful. So if you have never seen this report before, or this export, I recommend taking a look at it. Of course, you don't have to use that if you don't want to. There are many reports you can run. I'm not going to run them all because we don't have all day, but let's just talk about a couple of them. So under payroll reports here, there's lots of different reports that you might run out here. Maybe you want to look at like the details of the payroll, the summary of the payroll. Maybe what I like this one, the payroll summary by employee report. This kind of gives everything for the payroll. So you'll see here, there's my 10-6 payroll. Now, if you do have multiple payrolls running, maybe you have a couple different people running payroll, something like that, you can look at it maybe by the status. So maybe one of them is approved or not approved. Maybe you want to do it by the batch. So that name might be useful here. So you search for that name. If there's multiple people running payroll at the same time, maybe they have different batch names. All right, I'm going to show summaries by department and a total. So I checked both those boxes off, but I could use this to run it for like maybe just 1 department or something using these options right here. Choose if I want to group it certain ways, I could do that. Okay, sorting it maybe by the name. All right, so I'm going to run this as a PDF. Shouldn't take too long to run this report, and it's going to get, maybe 1 or 2, sometimes 3 employees per page, depending on the level of detail, the number of incomes, deductions, and taxes. You might have, just 1 employee per page if you've got a lot of detail, a lot of incomes that are being paid to 1 employee. But you can see here, I've got like 3. So, or actually, no, it's 2, and then the total for the department. So here's the regular time that got paid. Now, again, I might have like overtime and vacation, et cetera, which causes this to grow. Various deductions and taxes. So the employee part's in the middle. There's the company paid deductions and taxes, and then the net pay. Okay. So you might want to use this to, make sure everything's right. Now, you may have noticed I have multiple tabs open. That makes it so easy. If I come in here and I edit something on somebody, I could just refresh the report, just hit options and then hit apply again, and it will rerun the report. So I don't have to like click over to reports and do something and then click back to payroll, go back to the batch. I can just have multiple tabs or windows open to do that. So it makes it very efficient. All right, so, print this out, export it, whatever you're going to do. Maybe just look at it on the screen. And go back to payroll. Okay, just showing you the other way you could do it. Might be a little bit more time consuming to go through that way versus having the multiple windows open or tabs. All right, now if I make a change but I did not calculate, I would not be able to go to next, which is the total, because I haven't calculated something. So if I come in here and I change his bonus, save this, you see how I can't hit next here because there's a change pending for him I need to calculate. So if you ever see this where I can't hit next, just hit calculate, and this will recalculate everybody. Now, if I know it's 1 person, I could just go into their 1 record and recalculate, but you can see it's not taking that long to do. It's just a few seconds. So now it's ready to go as far as all the calculations. Now, it doesn't mean everything is correct. If you didn't put a deduction on somebody or you didn't add a bonus to somebody, we don't know that. So you need to update that employee record, but it does mean that the calculations are done and you can go to the next screen. So if you did need to edit an employee, you might go over to employees and go to somebody and let's say, add a deduction or something to the employee. If I do add something here, it doesn't know that I want to use this yet in the payroll. So, if I put this in, it's not going to gray out that next button because it doesn't know that I want to use this. So I would need to come back here. I'm assuming he's getting paid, and I would have to recalculate to make sure it gets included. So just be aware if I go and like change something on a deduction or something like that, I might need to recalculate. Of course, it's going to look at those dates. So if I put it out to 1/1/24, it's not going to make any difference. But I don't know where he is in here, but I'm assuming he's in here somewhere. He would have had a change. Okay, a couple other things. This I could compare to a previous payroll. So I can go out there and say, well, let's look at this one compared to last payroll. And this will generate a little spreadsheet that compares that. This will show the totals. So you can see here, gross pay, taxes, deductions. If you have any retro pay calculations out there, which I do, and we'll talk about this in another one, we're talking about retro pay, but this will calculate that retro pay for us. And this will save, if I change this and I, let's say, removed a column, maybe I don't care about titles, and I want to save this, I can just hit this little grid, and it'll save that, remove that title one. All right, so here the next page, the approval status. So everything is pending approval. I need to hit one more button to approve this, but here's the payroll that's out there. So I get all my incomes, there's my taxes for employees, deductions, etc. Keep going down, employer taxes, employer deductions. And assuming everything is good, I've run all the reports and exports, and I'm ready to move along, I'll go ahead and approve. So that gets it ready to process. In other words, print checks and direct deposits and so forth. So I need to go to payroll processing to do those steps. Now, in my situation, I am using Criterion to generate the ACH and do the tax filing manually. I'm not using a service. So I'll only have a couple of options up here for this. I'm also not doing a positive pay. So you may have other options in your menu here. But I'm going to choose print checks. Now your status here, you might choose to run it by a group. You might have different sorting and so forth. Mine, I just did kind of generic, just sorted by the employee's name. And this will generate the PDF that I would print out. Now, again, your check might look different than mine because I don't even remember what check format I'm using. So don't worry about that. Now, you may have noticed mine says generate BACS. That's actually, if for the UK, it's direct deposit. Yours probably say generate ACH. It might say generate EFT. Just depends on what country you're doing payroll for. It's the same things. All right, so all those ones that are checks were paid. And just so you can see what that look like here. Oh, it's not going to open. So this is an example. As again, yours might look different. All right, let me do my ACH here. Like I said, mine says BACS, that's for the UK. But that's going to be your direct deposit, your EFT, whatever you may want to call that. All right, and so that's done. Now, if something happened, maybe I forgot to put checks in my check printer, I can go ahead and like select some records to reprint, or maybe I ran out of checks or something, and I need to reprint them, or it jammed up, and I need to, it smeared these checks. I can always void these and reprint them if I needed to. And say, yeah, Colin and Ted here, unfortunately, the check printer got all jammed up, so I need to reprint those. Let's just print those two again. All right. So when I'm done here now, as I mentioned, I don't have positive pay, but if you have positive pay, you might see an option in here to generate positive pay. I don't have that enabled, but that is an option up there. Once you've completed all the steps in this drop-down menu, you might have also to transfer to the processing house. So that's also an option that might be up here, but I don't have that. So I'm just going to hit complete batch. Now, basically, payroll is done except for the general ledger. Now, mine is set to transmit off to an ERP. You might have a download button here. You also might have stuff under your tax filing that you need to do. So depending on whatever system you're using for that, I'm not going to cover that because there's different systems and options there. We'd be happy to talk about those. If you're not doing it manually, you want to maybe use Atrix, we can talk about that. But here's my ERP. I've got whatever account numbers, and yours, of course, might be very different, might have different like projects and segments of your GL and so forth. But you can see how this looks here, and then transmit or download, depending on how your system is working. Yours might be download, you might be transmitting. But that's it. That's the last step, basically, of processing payroll. So I know I went pretty quickly and very generically, but I did want to go over all those things. I think I saw some questions that got rolled in. Hopefully those got answered. I believe that all the questions got answered by Connor or Patrick, so thank you for those questions. Let me go over and talk about our upcoming training. So thank you for your time today. This is our upcoming training. We actually have a training in a couple of days where we're going to talk about catch-up contributions. It's specifically for the US because, well, there was supposed to be a law that went into play on January 1st and it got delayed, but we're still going to go over doing catch-up contributions because it's important information. You may not be aware of how that works in the system. So we're going to talk about that in a couple of days here, catch-up contributions and how to process those in payroll, how to set it up, how to process those in payroll. And then in 2 weeks, back to our normal scheduled time, we're going to talk about employee management. I think initially it said for 15 minutes, but we're going to do the normal 30 minutes there. So that's like mass hiring, mass termination, mass leave of absence, and those processes that affect usually more than one person at a time. We're going to talk about that. And then in about a month, the end of the month here, we're going to talk about leave of absence. So on Halloween, we got leave of absence training. And then I believe we're going to start rolling into the year-end stuff. We haven't exactly determined if it's going to be the very first training in November or if we're going to have one more training before we talk about year-end. So stay tuned for that. We'll probably know on Thursday. If that, and of course, you may not be joining that one, but you definitely will know by the 17th exactly what we're going to be doing for year-end processing. It's going to be similar to what we did last year, but a lot of times you need refreshers because you don't do it every pay period. You do it once a year. So thank you for joining us today. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Phone number, email address is there. We're always here to help you out, answer those questions for you. And we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us.